Peter, we here at Modern Husbands are thrilled to partner with your company, Tiller. And I in particular love Tiller and use it myself to manage money in my marriage. And I know from our expertise, and I know from using Tiller myself how beneficial it can be for both engaged couples who are transitioning into marriage to try to sort out a system that works for them, and existing couples who want to dive more deeply into understanding money in their marriage and have productive conversations about their household finances. So again, we're thrilled to partner with you.
Thank you. Likewise, we have a lot of respect for what you're doing at Modern Husband, and it's a really important message and important content. So glad to be a part of it, and always look forward to having a chance to talk.
There's more than one approach to managing money. We know that. And when you are in a marriage, there are a number of factors that are pulled together that have to intersect just right for couples to be able to manage money well. So obviously, personal finance is more personal than finance. And so the first thing to recognize is that there's, a base level understanding that people have to have about money. And then the next thing they need to understand is that, we all have our own money stories, our own relationships with money that are formed throughout our life, oftentimes stemming from our childhood. Another key consideration is that the psychology of money impacts how we spend and save our money, and in particular, how we are pulled in many different directions wherever we are to spend money, whether it's on our phone or we're out and about, and how the psychology and the effectiveness of those types of strategies are impacting us. And finally, and what's most important pertaining to what we're doing today is the relational aspect to managing money. Because if I'm managing money individually, that's far easier, because now I just need to understand the mechanics of money management. I need to understand how I interact with money myself, and how to use psychology as a way to make spending more difficult and saving easier. But when there's another person that's involved in that process, there is an art to that approach. So my excitement for this is that we can discuss the art and you have the science. And I found in using Tiller myself in my marriage that using the science of Tiller not only simplified our lives, but it also made the art of the conversation about money far easier. So what we hope to do is create these two tutorials for folks who are managing money in a relationship. So one would be, the art of the conversation on how to do this before marriage. So imagine that you're transitioning into a marriage and you're going to pull your money together. And then the other tutorial is going to be focused on what you're going to do if you have an existing marriage. So with all of that said, if you're watching, what you can expect is just from me a few important evidence-based strategies on how to have conversations about money that lead to the end result that you desire, rather than an argument. And what Peter's going to do is show you the mechanics of money management using the Tiller system, and how those two conversations, mine and Peter's, intertwine with one another. So just real briefly, to begin an understanding of how you should approach your spouse, or in this case, your future spouse, as you're deciding how you're going to manage your money in marriage, know that the best way to do so is the best way that works for you. That's important to stress, because everybody's so different that you don't know what that looks like. Now, I can speak in terms of what the research has found. In first marriages, what has been found is that for engaged couples and married couples that have been married within the last couple of years, that extensive research has been done that putting all of your money together, just blending it all together and managing it as one, actually causes more happiness in marriage. And there are a number of reasons for that we can go into in a later tutorial, or you can go to modernhusbands.com and read about. But just know that on average, putting all of your money together is most effective. Now, that doesn't mean it's most effective for you, and we'll get to that in a second. Now, assume that you're going to pull all of your money together. The reason why Tiller is such an important tool to use is because you can actually link all of your current bank accounts to Tiller, and then you can upload all of your financial data from those accounts, whether it's your credit card accounts or your bank accounts. And all of that data over the last 3 months is going to tell a story. It's going to tell your story, and it's going to tell a story of your spouse's. And so if you're blending your money together, it's going to make it a lot easier to have all of that data on one spreadsheet, so you can each tell your individual money stories and then figure out the ways where you can both manage money effectively. And so what does that look like? Well, if the first thing that you need to recognize is that for some people, and you might be one of them, managing money is an emotional topic. And so validating that in your spouse as well is important, because you need to schedule time in advance to conduct this kind of conversation where you're not going to be distracted. You're not going to be at a heightened emotional state. You're going to feel relaxed, and you're not going to feel rushed. So you want to set aside for your initial big money conversation probably a couple of hours. And when you enter into that conversation, enter into the conversation with the idea of creating joy, because that's ultimately what we're doing, right? Money is just transferred energy. And if we look at money as transferred energy, then we're just going to have a conversation about what it is that we get the most joy out of when we use money. Where do we want our energy spent? And start the conversation by talking about what you love spending money on. One piece of advice is to dream to begin. Ask your spouse, if you were to win $1 million, what would you want to do with it? And then vice versa. And really what you're talking about is, what is your vision of living in retirement? So you're starting with something fun, but you're starting with a shared goal that you're going to accomplish through a natural conversation. And then you can start to use like Tiller. So as an example, once the data is already uploaded, you can share with one another, with the transactions that you can see, what you love spending money on and what it is that you don't necessarily love spending on. And be very careful about how you approach that second part. So at first, maybe be critical of yourself. We all make impulsive decisions, and maybe highlight to your future spouse, hey, if I were to do it again, I probably wouldn't have bought A, B, and C. And then let your spouse do the same. And you want to avoid language where you are attacked, or it feels as if you're attacking or you're judging your spouse's spending decisions. Make sure that it's more of a conversation about what you both like to spend money on. And then as you're going through that process, you can decide, are there things where you both want to reduce spending? Are you happy with your spending? And at the conclusion of this, you can build a budget. You build a budget based on where you want to get, which is the conversation about winning the lottery. You build a budget based on where you want to spend your money and the values that matter to you most, which you've discussed because you've talked about what you enjoy spending money on, both individually and together. And you've recognized that there are maybe a few things that you each want to restrain spending on in the future, and perhaps use that money, that energy, in a way that will bring you and your relationship more joy. So with all of that said, Peter, if you wouldn't mind, for this video, we're just simply sharing a couple, so two people who are transitioning to marriage and planning on pulling all of their money together. So can you walk us through the mechanics of doing that using the Tiller system?
Absolutely. Yeah. Thanks, Brian. And that's a great overview. And it so resonates because Tiller started when I married my wife, Shannon, and we started a family and we needed better tooling. So that example you just shared is firmly rooted in the history of Tiller. So I'm going to share my screen here. You can see that?
I can.
Okay, great. So I'm going to just start on Tiller's homepage here. And Tiller's designed to help you track all your money in one place. We feed all your transactions and balances into your own private spreadsheet. We update it every day. We give you helpful templates that relate to budgeting, net worth, tracking. We have an awesome customer success team that's based here in the US and is here to answer questions. We have a community that's vibrant where Tiller users are sharing templates and ideas and workflows that they have that might be helpful to others, and people are asking questions as well too. And it's all wrapped in a strong posture towards privacy. From the beginning, we've built Tiller so that no one here at Tiller, not me, not the engineering team, not support, no one sees customer transactions and balances unless you decide to share them, share your spreadsheet with us or otherwise. But by default, they're completely private and not visible to us. And our only revenue comes from subscription fees. So that's a quick overview of what is Tiller. When you come to our website here, tillerhq.com, the next step is you can start your free 30-day trial. And I'm just going to pop through a few quick screens here. When you connect to Tiller, you're going to choose to either authenticate with your Google account or your Microsoft account. We actually support Google Sheets and Microsoft Excel, both. And you can create multiple spreadsheets on both platforms, no matter which identity you use to authenticate. So don't think too hard about it. Just start with whatever account you use most, be it a Google account or a Microsoft account. From there, you're going to go to the console. And the console is where you can create spreadsheets. And I have a few examples I'm going to walk through. You can also connect your bank accounts here. Adding more bank accounts is as simple as clicking Add Accounts, and will take you to your bank website. You can authenticate and connect and feed your transactions into your Tiller spreadsheets. And we encourage you to connect all your accounts, because ultimately giving you financial clarity is going to be easier if you have not only the credit card that you're using most often and the checking account you're using most often, but the other accounts. Maybe there's a few credit cards you're not using regularly. Maybe there's some 401k, student loan, mortgage, you name it. Add that account, and then you'll have a complete view of your whole financial life in one place. So to start with, I'm going to open up this spreadsheet here, and this is Peter and Shannon's shared Tiller sheet. Now, in this example of a couple coming together, this could have just as easily started as Peter's Tiller sheet, and then over time, we are engaged, we're married. In that console, if we go back here, I can simply add new accounts. I can add the shared accounts, my wife's accounts. I can add all the accounts and rename the sheet. And now it's gone from Peter's sheet to Peter and Shannon's shared sheet. So here we'll see all of our transactions from all of our banks fed in. And one of the, I really like, Brian, how you talked about like figuring out what works for you, because we're all different. All of us, our goals are different, our workflows are different, how we think about money is different, our emotions are different. And so when you're getting started with Tiller, a first step is setting up your categories and figuring out what are some categories that make sense. The flexibility built into Tiller, you can have as few or as many categories as you want. You can have one category, you can have 100 categories. Here I've set up an example of some categories that sort of resonate with how we think about money in our home, but again, you could modify them. There's some bill categories related to phone and utilities. There are these discretionary categories here that are eating out, gear, clothing, subscriptions, all stuff that we can dial up or dial down any given month. If we're like, oh, we're spending a lot, discretionary is easy for us to modify. We have kids, so we have kid-related expenses. There's lots of gear that comes with kids, and there's classes in school and other extracurriculars that sometimes come with kids. And then we have these living expenses. These are the expenses that, when things are tight, we don't generally squeeze or not. They're sort of like groceries are groceries, medical is medical, auto and gas. In this example, we have one paycheck coming in, and there are sometimes transfers is used if I'm taking my money from my checking account or our checking account and transferring it to our credit card. That's money moving between accounts. That's a transfer. And reimbursable, that's just a place where we track expenses. Again, this is how we've set it up, that are related to work that I know we're going to get reimbursed from. So if we spend $100, I spend $100 on something work related, it's not really an expense. I know in a few weeks I'll get reimbursed. So it gets its own category. Once these categories are set up, then on your transaction sheet, and all of this, by the way, is managed by the Tiller Money Feeds add-on, which is a Google Sheets add-in. We also work with Microsoft Excel, and it's almost the same in how it works. Microsoft Excel has our Tiller Money Feeds add-on that also lives on the right side of the spreadsheet. And this is where I can go to fill my latest transaction data into my spreadsheet and access other features related to Tiller. So this is an example of a sheet that has already a number of transactions in it. By default, if you sign up for Tiller, you're going to have about 3 months of data pulled in on your first fill, and then you keep it updated every day. And so you can see here, I have a number of transactions that I've already categorized, and there are some new ones since I've been in here last. So there's a couple ways to address the ongoing management of categories. One of our biases here at Tiller is that we, by default, we don't want to guess what your categories are. It's too important to have your data organized for us to just guess. And also, if we go back to this category sheet, your categories really need to reflect how you think about your money with the specific words that you want to use. And so knowing that, there's two ways to then categorize these transactions. I can go through here and I can say, okay, this is a grocery expense, and this is a subscription expense, and I can go ahead and categorize these manually myself. I can also set up AutoCat rules, and I have some AutoCat rules here that are already set up just to show you how AutoCat works. So I can say if the description says Harvest Vine, categorize it as restaurants. If it's Feathered Friends, I know that's where we get our outdoor gear, categorize it as gear and clothing. And I can create my own AutoCat rules that reflect my categories and my spending. And so if I go back to this transaction sheet, I can manually categorize a few transactions, or I can also open up AutoCat using the Tiller Money Feeds add-on on the right side. And from there, I can have it apply all those category rules that I've already created by simply clicking Run AutoCat. And if you are, as you get into a groove with using Tiller, you can have it with Google Sheets, you can have it update your Google Sheet even when it's not open, and auto-categorize using AutoCat. And so here we go. Now all those transactions that weren't already categorized are now categorized. I give a quick look over. This looks about right. Again, one of the awesome things about AutoCat, just to go here, you can not only create and this is a great example here. I have two rules related to Starbucks, okay? One of them is if it's a Starbucks expense and it's on my Bank of America card, that's a reimbursable expense because I went out for a meeting with someone and I want to make sure I track it as reimbursable. If it's a Starbucks expense on any other card, then that's restaurant, that's eating out. That's how we categorize it. You don't have that degree of flexibility with any other tool, but with Tiller, you can really dial in and make your AutoCat categorization as precise as you want. We're back here in the transaction sheet. We've updated our transactions, and now it's time. And again, this is really the same process as an individual or the same process as a couple. You can go in and look, okay, let's look at our monthly budget. Now, the monthly budget, you can dial in based on your, I'm going to actually copy this over because I hadn't set up. You know what? I'm going to pause here for a little.
Actually, don't pause. There's a few things that I want to add that are really important to stress as we kind of review what Peter has shared thus far about the mechanics of the tiller system. And the first is that when you are, again, we're assuming you're engaged to be married or you're somehow blending all of your finances for the first time. It's as simple as getting one subscription and putting in the bank account information from each of your accounts. And it's also as simple as putting in, your payment information. How do you get paid? How do you get compensated? And once you do that, moving to the categories is just as important, because the categories really are going to tell your shared money story. Because before, you might not have been somebody who felt like you needed to budget or you need to establish categories, but to be on the same page, some people need to be a little bit more specific about the categories of money that they spend and save with, because it makes it easier to have money conversations. And to be able to customize it is essential for couples who are trying to work together, particularly couples who are busy. And I want to stress this. When we initially uploaded and categorized all of our spending for the last 3 months, we did that so then moving forward, basically everything was automated. We're busy. My wife and I both work. We have 3 kids. We don't necessarily have the time to dive into the nitty-gritty of our personal finances every day. What we want is a system that is automated, where we can simply open it and we have updated information that's already categorized. So when we do have conversations about money, other than that very first conversation, we don't have a lot of preparation that's necessary. And so if you're going to have a conversation with your partner regularly, then having this data on you is important. Now, you both don't have to look at the spreadsheets. Matter of fact, we find that most couples have one person who loves the spreadsheets and loves the specificity of these types of financial transactions. We have another, and then usually the other spouse can't stand it. They will oftentimes in money conversations just have questions. And so you can have the data in front of you to respond to the questions, but they don't have any interest in diving into these types of details. And if you're one of those couples, that's okay. That is completely healthy, as long as you have transparent conversations so you both have equal control over your money. That is, having a plan for every penny, having an idea of where all of your money is going. But the actual grind that is necessary, when I say grind, everything, managing your credit cards, your investments, etc., it's completely normal if only one partner tackles that primarily, and then the other partner is just kept up to date.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks, Brian. That is you're absolutely right, and that's really a common way that it works. And then imagine there's one partner in there regularly. They're keeping it up to date. They're putting a lot of thought into how it's organized. And you can sit down as a couple and for a few minutes regularly and take a look at a summary view. The budget view is one of my favorite examples. And this is really useful whether or not you set a budget. If you don't set a budget, the budget column's all going to be zeros. That's fine. What I pay a special attention to is the actuals, right? So this is looking at our November data. And you can pull this from the drop-down menu. You can pick out what data you want. And if we look at our November data, we can see, all right, so in this sheet, we have our income, and now we have our expenses. And we can, if you are setting a budget, you can sort of see, okay, like restaurants, our budget was 300, we spent 531. We went a little hot in budgets, but we also didn't do any home improvements. So you can sort of see, if you end up using budgets, you can see how things shake out. And this gives you a quick view based on your categories, the ones you set up and the groups you want to use. And it's a really quick, concise dashboard to help you understand and see what's going on. And frankly, looking at it, spending that time as a couple on a monthly basis is a really good cadence. If you're starting this practice, it's really helpful to do it more frequently, because it's useful to check in, like, what happened every day or what happened each week, and to make sure that everyone's paying attention and that we're all thinking about it and we're all synced together. And that can be a really short touch base. But the monthly view, even for people who've been at it a while, the monthly view is a really good conversation to have. If you've been married for years, this might be a 5-minute conversation. If you're newlyweds, you might spend an hour or two on it because there's a lot of good information here. It's like, ooh, interesting. How does this sync with our priorities, right? Like we want to travel more. We didn't travel much. Is that because we are like other things become important, or have we just not given the time to it? Like, do we need to look at our calendar and figure out like, hey, we should be taking more trips? Like, what does this mean? And how does this align with our values? There's so many, each of these lines, each of these categories, they're conversations, and they're great conversations that can bring you together and help you build the life you want together.
And I want to echo your sentiments because what Tiller does in pulling together all of that information and coalescing it into one dashboard with a budget is it makes a world where spending is ultimately fractured, where it's all over the place. It's not uncommon for people to have 3, 4, 5 credit cards, have different bank accounts, and now you're merging with somebody who has the same. And unless you have a central tool that you can rely on to look at all of your spending and saving in one place, you will lose track. It doesn't matter how organized you think you are. It's too much as responsibility becomes more and more in your marriage. And so one of the features of Tiller that my wife and I take advantage of is having a daily update of all of our spending emailed to my email address. And it's simply an update of my Tiller account. And the reason I do that is I just want to make sure that we have children, that they haven't overspent, they haven't done something they shouldn't have done. And I also want to keep our accounts safe because if you are a victim of identity theft, if you recognize identity theft right away because you get that email and you scan it for the 24 seconds it takes, you can jump on it and it's far easier to resolve than if you're looking backward a month.
Absolutely. That daily email is one of the most popular features, and it's some people, they just flip through it. They wake up, they flip through it. It's in their inbox in the morning. They're like, well, everything's normal, relatively speaking. And then you can actually get your fingers into the data at some point later when you get into your spreadsheet. But if there is anything unusual, you're going to spot it.
Now, if you recall in the beginning, I said that we were going to have 2 video tutorials. This is the longer of the 2. The second one is going to be devoted to folks who would prefer to keep some of their money separate. And there are reasons for doing that research has found are effective and that make a lot of sense. So just because the mass says, hey, blend all of your money together, doesn't mean that's in your best interest. So be sure to watch the second tutorial on not only why some people would want to do that, but also the mechanics of doing that using the Tiller system.